All right, so we're going to talk about equations of patterns. The thing we've been talking about so far is how to see a pattern and talk about it and describe it. Now what we're going to do is turn it into an equation, which is basically a math sentence, so that we can use it to calculate stuff. So our goal is to be able to write an equation to represent a situation. For example, you might have something like this. This would be an equation. We're going to understand what that means by the end of this video. So let's look at the first example, skydiving. So in this picture, we've got someone skydiving. We want to figure out a couple things first. The first thing we need to know are the variables. In every situation we're going to be doing in this unit, there's always two. There's always going to be two things that have number values that are related. A lot of times, these things will be things you've heard of and work with all the time. Time, height, distance, money, hours, that's kind of like the same thing. Amount of something, like hamburgers, whatever, okay? All those things can be variables. We want to think about what two variables are existent in this question. So we got a dude, two people, jumping out of an airplane. Immediately when I think about airplane, I'm thinking about height, right? How high are they? The other thing that we want to think about is when does things change? In this case, their height is going to change as time goes by. So our two variables are going to be time and height. So we need to figure out which one's going to cause the other one. The kind of cheat is that time is almost always the independent variable. And we'll show what that means in a sec. So I'm going to make a quick table of values to help make this make sense. So we have x and y, which is the same as time and height. Okay, so we usually start with 0 for whatever our x variable is going to be, in this case time. So after 0 seconds, minutes, hours, whatever, how high are they? Well, they're in a plane, so their height's not going to be 0. Let's call it I don't know, they're 100 meters in the air, something like that. Next, after 1 minute, is their height going to go up or going to go down? Well, they're jumping out of a plane, so they're going down. So let's say it gets to 90. And then you can see the pattern. Next could be 80, 70, okay? So we have some data. What we need to figure out are the two important things we've talked about before. The change and the start. Actually, let's do that in green. And the start. The start number is pretty easy to see. When we look over here, it's whatever was the value at 0. So in this case, it's 100. The change is how much it's changing by every time. We know it's changing by 10, but it's going to be negative 10 because it's going down. These two numbers are going to be super important when we write the equations. So the way we're going to write this equation, it's always going to look like this example we did. It's always going to be y equals mx plus b. Each of these things means something different. The b is the start number. The reason is that if we took away this mx part, which we'll talk about after, all that would be left is the start. That's how much we have to start with. So in this case, it's going to be 100 plus 100. The mx, let's talk about the m, that's the change. So in this case, it was negative 10. So I'm going to write that negative 10 in there. The y and the x actually stay the same. The reason they stay the same is because we can actually put in any number we want to figure out the rest. So for most of this unit, we're just going to be trying to find what y is. So for example, if I wanted to know how high she was, and remember, y is height. If I want to know how high she was after 20 seconds, I would replace the x with 20. We're going to go over that more later. The important thing you need to know now is how to write this equation. So let's recap the parts. Y is time, or height rather. And if you want to use a different letter, like h for height, that's fine. So the height is equal to negative 10 times the time plus 100 meters. This will help us explain and understand the situation of these skydivers. Let's do another example so we can make it a little clearer. So we have this Tim Hortons person working a sweet job at Tim Hortons. going to set up the equation the same way. Y equals mx plus b. Now, we got to figure out, someone working at Tim Hortons, what's going on. So, time is passing, and she is making money. Those are our two variables. Again, time is always going to be this one, the independent variable. So I'm going to call it t. And then money, we'll put over here. We'll call it like M for money. We'll call it D for dollars. How about that? Okay. M and B are always going to be numbers we got to figure out. So let's think. When she first starts her job, how much money does she have? She didn't start with any money. She has $0. You might say maybe she has a bank account where she has like a lot of money saved up. So then maybe she has, I don't know, like $1,000 to start, something like that. I'm just going to say 0 for this question. Then I got to figure out how much is she earning. Well, maybe we'll put like minimum wage, right? Like 12 bucks per hour. And there we have our equation. Let's read through it together. The amount of dollars she has is equal to $12 per hour times the amount of hours she works plus the $0 she started with. That's how you read that equation. This last one is kind of tricky. Let's look at the pattern and figure out what's going on first. So we need to say what our two variables are. Y equals mx plus b. Let's figure out what these two are, the y and the x. So in the other one, we had time over here, and we had time over here. There's no time in this situation, but there are things that are causing it to change every time. These are the steps. So the steps are going to be our x value. So I'm going to call it s. Okay? What's the only other thing in this question? Well, the y value is going to be like the number of blocks. So I'm going to call it, or the number of squares, I don't know, we'll call it that. Make it a square symbol. You maybe want to say like the number of lines in the pattern and count each individual line. It's probably easier to just do squares. So if I wanted to count, that would be 6 squares. This would be 10 squares. This would be 14 squares. Okay? So we found our two variables. Now we need to figure out the starting value and the change value. Change value is pretty easy to see. Let's look at how much it changes every time. It's increasing because the amount of squares is going up by 4 every time. So that means that I'm going to put 4 here. Now, the starting value is where a lot of the kids make mistakes. In this one, it looks like it starts at 6. But remember when we looked over here at our table of values? Our starting value was whatever it was when x was 0. In this picture, x is 1. I need to look back 1 in order to find out how many blocks were at 0. And since it's going up by 4 every time, I know there's only going to be 2 left in the original, which means that that 2 is going to be my starting value over here for my equation. So let's reread the equation. The number of squares in this pattern is equal to 4 times the step number we're on, plus the 2 in that very first pattern at the step 0. That's the whole equation. Okay? So you need to be able to take a situation like someone skydiving, someone working at Tim's, or a pattern, and write your equation out. It's always going to look like this, except that the m and the b are going to be numbers. So let's try one more together. Y equals negative 2x plus 5. Think for a sec about what this situation could represent. If you're having trouble getting started, think about maybe the situation is someone, let's say like packing boxes at home. So what I was thinking was that x could be time if you wanted, and y could be the total number of boxes. So it's like how long it takes to pack boxes or something, or how long it takes to unpack boxes, whatever. So when we look at this situation, you started with 5 and you lose 2 every time. So maybe this is like you have 5 boxes to start and then you lose 2 every hour as you unpack them. That's what this equation is saying. Okay? That's it. Those are the basic skills. I know there was a lot going on. We learned about variables like x and y, and we learned how to write this equation and how to read it. And that's it.